Hi there, I am the
Hello.
CRM Ninja, and on today's episode of the Oops Factor, I have Malcolm McAuley. Welcome to the show, Malcolm.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on the show. We know several people in common, and one of them, we won't mention who, of course, nominated you to be on here. So great to have you on.
Yes, I appreciate it, and I have given her thanks, the thanks for putting my name forward.
Yes, I'm sure she has been most grateful for that. So apart from the fact that at the moment in the UK it's a heat wave, which is obviously why my head is in the middle of an ice pitch. The reason why my head is also in the middle of an ice hockey pitch is because I understand you're into hockey.
Yeah, I am. I'm a fan of hockey. I mean, I grew up playing the sport. I have two kids. They both have played in the past, and it's a passion of mine. I think I might be a bigger baseball fan lately, the last couple of years, but hockey's definitely been a huge part of my life.
I have to say, and for those who don't know Malcolm, Malcolm lives in Canada, that of all the Canadians that I've met over the years, and I studied abroad and made a load of Canadian friends, it seems like 99% of them have actually played ice hockey at one point
Probably.
or another.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty accurate stat. It's a widely popular. I mean, a lot of people think of stereotypes of Canadians, and it's ice hockey's up there with maple syrup and being too polite, right? And so that it's a big part of our culture and everything that we do here. Although our teams tend to struggle, so we don't need to talk about that though.
It's okay, we won't talk about teams. So whether they're hockey teams or Microsoft teams, because let's face it, technology sucks at times as well. So how old were you when you started when you first got on the ice?
Oh, that's a great question. I believe I was 7. I remember my dad, we were driving somewhere and he said, "So what do you think?" But he didn't, there was nothing before that. And I said, "Think about what?" I remember it clearly. I said, "Think about what?" And he said, "About play." And he pointed, and we're driving to the arena to sign up for hockey. So I had no idea. I had skated before that, but I don't think I remember. But the actual first time playing hockey was about 7 years old. And I was never really good. So I did my part, but it was a long time ago. And then I played all the way through till I was about 18, and
Wow.
then that, like competitively. And then from there, it just became recreation until beer league and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really play anymore, but my kids play, and I've coached them for years. And this last year, obviously with COVID, lots of weird changes to the way sports happen. So both boys elected not to play this year, and they took up trampolining actually, which was super cool. But um,
Trampolining.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of
Wow.
quite a change from hockey on ice with sticks and skates to bouncing in the air. But my one son's a goalie, so he's already pretty flexible. So he took to trampolining really well, and I would say within a couple of months, he was doing all the different flips and backflips and splits in the air, and it's pretty wild what they can do. Yeah.
Pretty well, yes. And as you say now, hockey, competitive hockey seems to be quite yes, competitive. And
Yeah.
uh,
Well, there's a
I,
lot
I
of
don't know. I don't know if they overdo it in the movies when they sort of all slam one after another into each other into the protective glass or
I,
whatever it is at the side of it.
I mean, to some degree, there's obviously some showmanship there, I think, but it can be a rough sport, especially when you get teams that have strong rivalries against each other, and there can be a lot of like. I grew up in a small town, so we used to play against towns around us, and we knew most of those kids. We all went to school together, and the rule of thumb is always, you could be great friends at school, but when you get on the ice, there's no friendship there. You're playing to win. You're playing against each other. It's just the way it is. And as soon as the game's over and you get off the ice, maybe a little animosity if they hit you too hard or something like that. But by the time you leave the rink, you're good friends again, and that's just the way it rolls. So
Got it. Very interesting. Here in the UK, there's a bit of ice hockey going on, but nowhere near what it's like in Canada or America. So
right, right, fair enough. Yeah,
got
there's a
it.
lot of kids here who think they're going to grow up and play in the NHL, and then I don't know if you read much, but Malcolm Gladwell has a great book that he speaks to the whole 10,000 hours, and he actually uses hockey as an example of how the kids
Outliers.
who, yeah, and how they play, and the more they want to play, then they get played more, and the higher levels get more ice time. Therefore, they develop skills faster, and it's actually pretty fascinating to see where the divide happens. And it's pretty young at the point where those kids who are actually going to play serious competitive hockey branch off at, I think it's like 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old. They're already kind of at the point where they've had so much more ice time in those early years that it makes a huge difference. So it's an intense following here in Canada, that's for sure.
It is indeed. Yes, I know my friends are Canadian, and also some who are not Canadian but who follow it, and just how passionate they can be about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. So from ice hockey to the Oops Factor, what do you have to share with us today?
So I gave this some thought. I thought I could probably share stories that you've heard before about, whether you disable the production environment or something like that. And there was lots of interesting stories, I thought, but the one that popped to mind, because when we talked beforehand, you had said it doesn't necessarily have to be technology related.
That's correct.
And so this, the one that sticks out the most, I think that still gives me a bit of a blood pressure increase when I think about this, was years and years ago. I actually used to be in social work, and that was kind of the start of my career when out of post-secondary and all that. And so I worked for a nonprofit organization, and long story short, we had a volunteer with us who didn't go about their duties in the best way. And so we were pretty disappointed in the way they handled it. And so I wrote a letter, but it wasn't intentional. It was just a letter to release. Sometimes it feels good. They tell kids, go punch your pillow if you feel like getting in a fight because you're not going to hurt anybody. So the same idea. And I'm going to write the letter that I wish I could send, and then I'll delete that and I'll write the nice, polite, formal, proper letter.
I think I can see where this is going, but carry on.
I wrote a very strongly worded, very accusatory letter, and read it over a couple times and thought, okay, there. I got it out of my system, and then I went away for lunch and came back, and then moved on with my day and got the real letter ready and sent it and closed out the file and put it to bed and said, that's enough is enough, that I'm not going to think about that anymore. And the next day I came to work and was doing some cleanup, and on my desktop there was the letter that I had put up and sent, and I opened it up, but I had saved the not so great email or letter as if it was the real one. And so I then went into, you ever panic and you go into that white cold sweat feeling like I had put the wrong letter in the mail, to the point where I was looking up, how do I get a hold of Canada Post and tell them to stop this letter?
It was really in the mail. It was a very physical letter.
So I thought it was. So I had confused myself. This is the oops part of it, is I had myself wrapped around, every fiber of my being, thought I put that letter in the mail to this individual, and it's a day or two, she's going to get it, and we're going to be facing lawsuits. I'm going to lose my job. It's this is a horrible situation. And thankfully, the mail hadn't gone out yet. It was still sitting on the bottom of the pile at the front. I found it later that day, even after resigning to the fact that my life was going to probably end here within a couple of days. Found the letter, ripped it open, and it was actually the right letter. I hadn't made the mistake after all, but because I had saved it the wrong one. So that was a good lesson for me to just be very careful, right? Think about what you're doing. And yes, it was cathartic to get that message out, but you have to be really mindful when you're doing that kind of stuff, because I never want to live through that kind of panic again. I was young too. I was like 20, maybe 20 or 21 at the time. So just kind of getting started in the career, and think you got a good handle on everything, and then something like that comes along and pretty humbling, and you realize, it doesn't matter who you are, you got to think before you act, for sure. So,
wow. I would say as well, there's another lesson to learn out of that. So, because sometimes it is important to get your feelings out, because you can talk to yourself in your head, but you need to get it out, whether you type it out or you write it out or whatever you do. But make sure you name things properly when you save them.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I remember sitting there after realizing that it was all fine and everything was good. And I thought, how did this even happen? How did I save that copy under that different name? And I never did figure out what I had done. But it is what it is. And thank goodness it never unfolded the way I was fearful it was going to, and it never went out.
Would have been very lucky situation with that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I know people who, especially in the consulting line of work, when you're delivering similar sessions, right? You're not going to start a whole new presentation deck and something from the ground up. You're going to go into an existing one and copy and paste and do it and then tweak it slightly. But I know people who have done that and then forgotten to change the client name or logo and presented it or uploaded it and sent it through to them in advance.
Yeah.
Or even forgot to just copied and pasted it into a presentation and then forgot to take away the confidential information.
How to lose a deal 101, I think. So.
Yeah. It's interesting sometimes how clients can respond to that. Some can be very, very nasty, and others understand that they're human sides to it. But definitely quite important. So what do you do now when you come into situations like that? Do you still write things down, or how would you advise people to handle it?
Not in the same way. I mean, I don't think I handle it that way anymore. I think just with growth and maturity, you realize, to your point, everybody has good days, everybody's had bad days. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years, not necessarily from that situation, but just in general, is you never know what somebody else is dealing with and what they're going through. So even if they don't handle something the right way, or they maybe have done something in a way that's been offensive, I generally try and give people the benefit of the doubt. They probably didn't mean it the way I've perceived it. They didn't mean to cause offense. And if they did, well, maybe they're upset about it for some reason, and I don't necessarily know what that reason would be. Maybe they've been burned before by this situation, and it strikes a chord with them, right? So I think it's just trying to be understanding and try and give people the benefit of the doubt, understand where they're coming from, and always remember, I have no idea what call they just got off, what situation they're dealing with at home or somewhere else, right? Or in their own life, like, who knows, maybe somebody just got a horrible call from a doctor.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
They can't just walk away from work, and so they're going to be on edge, and they probably didn't mean what they just said. So
if you could sit down, if you could go out for a beer or drink or something, sit down across the table from your 20, 21-year-old self, what two things would you tell them, in terms of not just that put yourself into the thing, but what more active things in terms of what they might be able to do to actively help the situation?
That's a great question. It's a really good question. So to your point, watch how you save your files. That's point half. I think it's, to give people, like I said, everything I just said, right? To don't jump the gun. Don't always assume that somebody's trying to do something harmful or offensive or whatever the case may be. That they're generally not. People are generally good. And I think this may or may not be related, but looking at the world we live in today, it would be to take all social media with a grain of salt. Don't judge other people based on what you see and how they present themselves, because that's not always the way it is in real life. And we see the best of everyone in a lot of these platforms, and we absolutely do not see the worst. And I'm an offender of this too. I don't use it all that much, but I don't typically post the crappy bad day things on there.
Yeah.
It's the cool stories, the good things, the wins that get posted. So
Indeed. And also that we can make mistakes. I mean, I don't know about in Canada, but in the UK recently, with some of the sports personalities, whereby people have been trawling back through their social feeds and they find something from 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yes.
Very different people, and the world was a very different place then as well. I'm not necessarily condoning that what they did then was right, but to say that somebody now should be penalized for something they did as long ago as that, I don't think is the right thing to do.
I would agree with you on that. Yeah, I think it's frustrating to some degree to look at where we are, because everything seems to be a love or hate. You can either love something or hate something. There's no middle ground. I actually wrote a blog about this ages ago. I don't think I ever published it because I couldn't really get the right words around it, but it was all about there seemed to be no more ability to say, I'm going to think about that for a bit before I react and pick one side or the other. You have to know now, you have to know immediately, and you have to either love it or hate it. And if you don't love something, hate something, then you're off your rocker. You have to love it or hate it right away, and that just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand how we're supposed to teach our kids and our future generations to be objective thinkers and really weigh all the options when that's what they're growing up with, right?
Very difficult challenge, definitely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Malcolm, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing those wonderful stories.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thanks so much. And I appreciate the background too, even though our Toronto Maple Leafs are frustrating and temper in themselves.
I deliberately didn't ask you what team you had, and I wasn't going to go searching the team. This is a generic one. It's about the game rather than being a specific team and such. But yes, viewers, we hope that you've enjoyed the episode and learned something from it in terms of how to react or not react to people, and of course, how to save files. And if anybody actually comes up with a way of pulling back a letter after it's been sent in the mail, drop me a line. I'd love to know what sort of crazy idea you've come up with, legal idea you've come up with. But otherwise, feel free to check out the rest of the Oops Factor playlist, subscribe to the channel, and take a look at the blog. And if you would like to come on and share your own Oops Factor story, hit the link below in the description and fill in your details, and I'd love to have you on the show. But above all, have a wonderful day.